Welcome to the October 11th, 2021 Education Committee and Supplementary Regular Board Meeting of the Lower Merion Board of School Directors. We are asking those in attendance of tonight's meeting in person to please wear a mask, and your mask should remain on when giving public comment at the podium as well. The board believes it's in the best interest, and the best interest of the students of the district to hear comments from district residents. An opportunity will be given for public comment in person and through the chat feature, which will be read by Ms. Buckman. This meeting is being live streamed and video recorded with sound for public broadcast. All participants joining via Zoom will be muted upon entry. I'd like to start this meeting by saying, in honor of National Coming Out Day, I want to let our LGBTQ plus students and staff and community know that we support and stand with you. And also, before we begin tonight's meeting, ask Ms. LaPera to show a quick video.
Well, hold on a second.
It's not the right video.
What? It's the one he gave me. Oh, no.
Nope. Okay.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
I thought he said he put it up here. It's okay. Give me a second.
Should we switch the order?
No, if you give me 2 seconds, I can probably pick it. Get it. Hold on, so sorry. Okay. Here we go. Sorry about that.
Being a superintendent is not an easy job, even if not everyone in the district really understands all of the responsibilities involved.
What do you think the superintendent does?
I don't know.
What do you think the superintendent does?
What are superintendents?
Over the course of his 6 years in Lower Merion, Superintendent Copeland has done a lot, from advancing the strategic plan to working to ensure equity for all of our students and staff. He's called snow days and dealt with COVID, inspired students at graduations, and spearheaded the effort to build a new middle school for our growing enrollment. He's even manned a spatula at the annual administration holiday breakfast. There have been more than a few battles along the way, but there's never been a doubt that Mr. Copeland always has the best interest of students at heart.
What do you think the superintendent does?
I would think that the superintendent, they probably just kind of are in charge and they have to make sure everything is in line. And they probably make some important decisions.
The superintendent cleans up the whole school, plus they might be the principal's helpers.
And so, from all of the students, staff, families, and the school board, Superintendent Copeland, we want to say thank you for all you've done and wish you all the best in your retirement.
Hi, Mr. Copeland. On behalf of Ellen Players, I just wanted to show our appreciation for the constant support you have given us throughout our shows.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland.
From Team 7-1
At Ballard Kenwood Middle School.
Leaves are falling all around. Time I was on my way. Thanks to you, I'm much obliged. Such a pleasant stay. But now it's time for me to go. The autumn moonlight's my way. But now I smell the rain, and with it pain, and it's heading my way.
Thank you, Ms. Buckman, for putting together that terrific video. On behalf of the board, I would like to say how appreciative we are, Mr. Copeland, for your dedication and service to Lower Merion School District. I was president of the Interschool Council in July 2015 when you first came to Lower Merion, and although I was not on the board, I do know that your passion for implementing our strategic plan led to the board's decision to offer you the opportunity to lead Lower Merion forward. We are incredibly grateful for your vision and leadership to guide the staff toward transitioning our strategic plan all forward from aspiration to reality. Your willingness to disrupt the status quo in pursuit of excellence, even when that status quo is very good, has led to data-driven changes in the way we measure student success, encourage student voice, provide professional development, and ensure that equity is a guiding principle in every decision our district makes. Your introduction of program evaluation to determine how we can improve through systemic change has led to changes that will continue in the challenge program, academic supports, start times, and special education. From the start of your tenure, you expanded our focus on cultural proficiency to implementing anti-racist programs and policies. You formed the Achievement Imperative Task Force in January of 2016 to bring district stakeholders together in an advisory and action-oriented capacity around achievement outcomes district-wide. Areas of focus included restorative justice, in-class supports, and jumpstarts and on-ramps. You spearheaded action that benefited all students, including one-to-one tutoring, full-day kindergarten for those students who need it for readiness, expanding equitable access to the challenge program, and hiring additional academic support staff as needed to support math and other curriculum changes. With this task force, you had begun to plan for an equity audit when the racial reckoning of the last 17 months gave more urgency and attention to anti-racist work, and you helped us move forward by recommending the board ad hoc committee on anti-racism and equity and developing the equity policy. Your thorough understanding of the intricacies of school budgeting and facilities management enabled us to acquire the land necessary for the new middle school without taking on additional debt. You worked through every detail of the middle school planning process with the architectural team to maximize the building's ability to support the students, staff, and curriculum while minimizing the impact on the taxpayers of the township and borough. Our new state-of-the-art middle school, opening next year, will be a lasting legacy of your tenure, and it will provide us with the flexibility the district will need as enrollments change over many years. We are especially grateful to have had your steady leadership during the pandemic, which required managing complex and rapid organizational change. You worked with your team and LMEA so that within weeks of closing abruptly, Lmsb was streaming education to its students virtually. You ensured that the district distributed more than 700 technology devices within weeks to enable student learning from home, and professional development was rapidly diverted to virtual educational issues. You also made sure we continued to feed our families in need, serving over 90,000 meals during the height of the crisis, despite the governor mandating our school buildings remain closed to everyone. You created a summer academy for students grades K through 12, the first in the county, in which over 1,200 students enrolled. You brought in the CHOP team quickly, volunteered the district as a testing site, worked with the public health department, and were in constant communication with other superintendents to gather and evaluate information. We credit our response during this challenging period to your exceptional leadership and change management skills. And despite having to spend enormous time responding to COVID, you continued to put in place the committees necessary to completely reimagine K through 4 and 5 through 8 education as necessitated by the new middle school. Throughout your tenure, you have maintained a focus on the holistic and academic needs of our students, and we know that you most enjoyed the opportunity to visit each of our schools and speak with students and teachers, including regular meetings with high school students. We thank you for your truly extraordinary leadership. You have left a lasting legacy and an exceptional team. We wish you and your family nothing but the best as you have your best days ahead of you. You? Maybe later. No. Oh, here we go. Heavy. There we go.
Jeez. Oh my gosh. That's beautiful. That's really beautiful.
Thank Denise.
It's a little more than I expected. It's all been a lot more than I expected. Please take note, Mrs. LaPara, that I didn't quite need this as much as you thought I would, although that may come. Again, to the board and to the community, thank you so much for your support over the years. It's true that the last year and a half have been, shall we say, different. I think I was talking to some of the administrators and I said, you know, I think Maslow had it right. There is a hierarchy and it's tough to reach actualization if you're worried about safety and you're worried about people just surviving. But I'd have to say thanks to my team for really not stopping and just worrying about safety, but also pushing the academic program ahead. I think it's an extraordinary place with extraordinary people. I said to the staff this morning that we see Lower Merion as a place of great resources, but we sometimes forget that the resources are its people, and they're not all imbued with great resources. The people come here from all walks of life to serve students in a public education, and public education is the cornerstone to our democracy. So thank you for letting me be part of it.
Here, we can make sure.
I think I need to.
Right. Great, so we'll move on to the presentation for this evening. I don't know, Mr. Copeland, if you'd like to provide a little background.
Sure. So when we had the directive to go ahead and begin to plan for moving our middle schools from 6-8 middle schools to 5-8 middle schools, I followed a bit of a game plan that I had in my last district, was to say, okay, let's figure out how we're going to make this move, and let's make it with some program improvements along the way. This time, we wanted to do that not only for 5 through 8, but K through 4, to say this is a great opportunity. As you've probably heard me say this before, never let a good crisis go to waste. The opportunity to say we want to reimagine our program and not just improve or move it another step was important. We were, if you want to give me credit for anything, it's hiring good people, and we hired 2 good people to make sure that they could work with the rest of the staff, teachers, principals, and parents to make that happen. So tonight you're going to hear primarily about our 5 through 8 program and some of the things that this is really a status report, just so that you get a glimpse, a pretty good glimpse into where the direction of the district is going with this important transition. So we've got our freshly minted new middle school, new name to the middle school principal, as well as Dr. McGloin. So Dr. McGloin.
Do I just have to do a slideshow? Yeah, never mind, I have those. Yep. Good. So tonight we're really going to focus on the schedule for 5-8. So as we continue our process for reimagining what our middle school is going to look like, a schedule change is going to be necessary to make that happen. And so we've been spending a lot of time in the spring talking about the schedule in our 5-8 committee, and then we convened a scheduling committee in the district for 5-8, which some of the members are members of our 5-8 committee, and many of them are not members of our 5-8 committee. It was really to widen our breadth of people that are participating in this. And so we had a 5-8 scheduling committee that met multiple times this summer. We met with Michael Reddick, who's a consultant that came in to work with us. He's actually going to be working with the K4 committee in November, and he'll be back a couple times to work with them to talk about their schedule as well. So we brought him in, and he worked with us, and then we spent a lot more time talking about what could the schedule look like and what should it look like to meet the programming that we're going to be talking about with you next month, actually. So you'll hear about programs from the 5-8 and the K4 committees next month, but this is the schedule to think about that. So if you remember, Back in 2016, we've talked about this before, and you may have seen this timeline, but that was when we looked at the enrollment projections, and there was a prediction of a significant population growth. And then with that came the need for additional space. So in 2017, the board determined that we would do a reconfiguration to a 5-8 middle school structure for 3 schools and 6 K-4 structure for 6 of our elementary schools, the K-4 structure. And then in 2018, we started to plan for new school construction. 2019 was when the committees were convened, that K-4 committee and 5-8 committee, to really think about what should the experience be for the kids as they come to school. And so, as we all know, right around that time, we had a pandemic hit, and everything halted because of that. And so then in 2020, we came back and we really restructured our committee, and we thought about what could this be for our students? What should it really look like? And so our K-4 committee, which you'll hear about next month, has 4 committees, subcommittees that are functioning right now. A Reimagined Design Committee, a Transformative Curriculum Committee, an SEL Growth and Development Committee, and an Equity, Access, and Intervention Committee. They actually met today to do work on schedule and many other things. Currently, in the 5-8 group, we have a bunch of different committees, and they are school culture, teaming, grading and reporting, enrichment, intervention and well-being, and unified arts. All of these are really important for our work, but not every single one of them actually plays a role in the schedule that we'll be talking about today. And if you recall, we've talked about the mission in the district that we came up with from the 5-8 committee. And you'll see a lot of the same words in this mission as what we have in our strategic plan, because we use that as our focus area to really talk about the mission of our committee in general. From the mission, you'll recall that we also created a 5-8 vision. And really, this is where we focused on how can we meet this vision for all of our students? What will each of these subcommittees mean? What does it mean to get to the point where this vision is being actualized? And we spent a lot of time on this in our subcommittees. And so just kind of going back, each of these subcommittees, school culture, teaming, grading and reporting, intervention, enrichment and well-being, and unified arts, really focused on those vision statements and said, in each of our subcommittees, how can we actualize that? How does that really come to life for us? And so tonight, we're going to specifically be talking about teaming, intervention, enrichment, and well-being in unified arts, because those 3 subcommittees have a direct influence on the schedule that we're going to talk about, the shell that we're coming up with. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Sow, and she's going to start to talk to you about the research that we used and then the recommendations for each of those subcommittees.
Okay, thank you so much. Our process that led us to where we are at this point in time has been really interesting and invigorating process, and it has been one that's been grounded in research. Clearly, we know that the middle school students are different developmentally by nature and how they are in their stage of development. And so we took all of that research to mind as we had our different committees look at aspects of the middle school program. Our diversity, equity, and inclusion subcommittee included representative members from all of the other subcommittees. And so with all of the work that was happening, we did so constantly with a DEI focus. And so you'll see throughout this presentation today times where DEI is noted. And the reason for that is a specific aspect that we believe focuses on improving access for all students in our school. The AMLE, which is the Association for Middle Level Education, this is a research and advocacy body that's really important for middle school educators. And they really talk a lot about the importance of teaming at the middle school. And so those of you who've been through the district, you know, we've used this model here in the district for a very long time, probably since the early 90s. And just as a reminder, you know, the teaming, it's not just about a shared group of students, but it's really about getting to designing integrated curricular units, engaging in problem solving, getting to know the students and their families, and determining how interdisciplinary blocks of time should be scheduled. And so while we have a history of teaming in our district, there's area for growth and expanding the role of that team. And so there are some structural components that we can put within a schedule that will allow us to augment some of the great foundational work we have related to teaming. So there was a subcommittee that really looked a lot at teaming and specifically this idea of flexible scheduling. And so I thought this was really interesting, that more than 90% of middle schools use the same kind of schedule that we have now, which is a fixed traditional time schedule, usually 7 or 8 periods in length from 41 to 55 minutes. But yet, there are decades of research that tell us that we could be doing this differently, and that when we empower teachers to take ownership over time, space, and students, and to think creatively about how they're delivering their content, that we see increased engagement for students, we see increased engagement for teachers, and it really can make the school a more powerful place. And so the teaming committee, with that in mind, had some specific recommendations. And they specifically really talked about this idea of flexibility and creating, a schedule and opportunity for teachers that are members of a team, and a team that's a microcosm of the larger school, that it represents the school in all of its aspects of diversity, but that it's developmentally appropriate, and with the recognition that students in 5th and 6th grade would benefit from smaller teams, slightly smaller teams of 2 to 3 teachers, and that you could have larger teams of teachers in 7th and 8th grade, and that it's important for the team to have a block of time for learning, enrichment, extended projects, inquiry-based learning, etc. A second committee looked very much at intervention and enrichment, and that committee looked at the idea that students learn in different times and space, and that high-performing schools ensure that learning resources are not locked for any student, that there's flexibility in terms of time, allowing adjustment for pre-teaching, reteaching, extension, enrichment. And so this committee looked at systems that we might be able to implement in our school to improve the use of our intervention and enrichment time, presently called WIN at the elementary or LEARN at the middle school. And so the committee had a variety of recommendations. They looked at both social emotional learning, making sure that we're carving out time for a homeroom or advisory period to help the students build relationships with one another, because we know that sense of belonging for middle school students is so important. And to make sure that the schedule includes time for daily intervention throughout the day, so that students are able to get the support that they need, allow the teachers to flexibly regroup the students as needed. We spent a lot of time thinking about unified arts and the specials that we're able to offer our students, and the idea of creating more choice and more options. I recently was reading, about middle school schedules, and sometimes we call these unified arts, sometimes we call them specials. In this particular school, they called these classes the connections classes, right? The space where we're bridging between that academic learning that's happening in the classroom and the real world application of it. We know the kids love the specials so much. And so the recommendation of this group was to really think of a way to connect that work more meaningfully to the content work that's happening, to increase that idea of students being able to solve real world problems, and to connect the specials area to the core content area. So to do this, we needed to think about structures that are in place that either constrain or enable the kind of flexibility and work that we want to do. And not just thinking about what we want to do next year, but maybe what we want to do in 3 and 5 years from now, knowing that we want to continue to grow and we want to continue to improve. So having done that, the scheduling committee was able to take all of the recommendations from the various committees and develop some priorities, some must-haves, things that need to be included in a schedule. It was important that the schedule that is selected is one that maintains core instruction time in the area of science and social studies, that it enables teaming, and that sometimes you can build things into a schedule that accidentally cause off-teaming or math classes that are not on team, or times where a team cannot be together. Making sure that the teachers have common planning time, both with their content partners as well as their grade level team partners. We talked about flexibility. We talked about the need to be developmentally different, that a 5th and 6th grader is developmentally different than a 7th or an 8th grader. We talked about the need to have that intervention enrichment. We know that one of the things that happens when you have that bell schedule where every 40-45 minutes you're moving from place to place, it's sometimes hard to really engage with the work that's in front of you and really think deeply about what's happening. So opportunities for extended math and ELA for students as well. Of course, with a mind of making sure we have time for social emotional learning. And then we want to really look at world language. We know that we're really fortunate. We have a FLES program in our district, and we want to make sure that that time continues in 5th through 8th grade, so we continue to offer students that really strong experience. So the process we went through was we did a research review. I highlighted some of that for you tonight. We did a variety of virtual visits. During the pandemic, it was hard to physically go some places. We did some in-person visits to local middle schools who have 5 to 8 models or different schedule ideas. We were able to work with our architects, actually, for the new middle school to have a panel discussion with some really innovative schools from around the country. We then found articles about specific schools that are trying different ideas, kind of highlight type things where, hey, let me tell you about a school that's doing this thing. We met with consultants, and we received a lot of input from 5-8 committees, scheduling committees, and those are committees that included teachers, administrators, and parents. And of course, we continue to seek ongoing teacher input. So we kind of had like 3 ideas that we worked through. The first idea was to have longer core classes for math, science, social studies, and English, and then world language could occur in the specials, that to get more time, you know, in one place, you have to move something to the other place, because that is sort of the bugger, right? Like, it's the amount of time in the day is the amount of time in the day. So I have not figured out how to create more time yet, but I'll let you know. The second idea was that in 5th and 6th grade, maybe having longer cores with a shorter amount of world language in the day. In 7th and 8th grade, having longer cores for ELA and math, but do something different with social studies, science, and world language. And the third idea was to look at the idea of having longer cores in 5th and 6th grade, but then in 7th and 8th grade, being thoughtful about how we're grouping and scheduling courses to create interdisciplinary blocks. And this is something that we could grow into and expand over time. So let's look at what some of those schedules potentially look like. So this is the first one I mentioned, where world language would exist as a special. So in 5th and 6th grade, there would be 3 longer core periods of about 80 minutes in length. Science and social studies would share one 80-minute block, and teachers would have autonomy either to split that or teach one day of social studies, one day of science. World language could move to the specials, just like it is in 6th grade now. It has a slightly longer lunch and recess time because 5th and 6th graders need a little bit more movement and that sort of thing. And a slightly longer intervention and enrichment time because we want to enhance what's happening in that time. In this model, 7th and 8th grade had 4 60-minute blocks. World language moved to the specials, and we'll talk about what that did in a minute. Again, you have the longer recess time and the INE. So here, you'll see that we went back to those scheduling priorities, and items that are in green are places where we feel like this schedule met, and then places in yellow that sort of met, and red did not. So this schedule did a number of things. 60 minutes of core instruction time was great. That longer time to really think. It would be clean with teaming, and you could truly team. Teachers would be able to have common planning time. Not as much as what we wanted with that flexible scheduling. It didn't naturally lend itself to have those interdisciplinary connections that we're talking about, and it definitely didn't loop in the specials as much as we were hoping for, to having those connected to the core content. And the big problem with this one is there's a significant reduction in world language time. And so as you calculate that over the 4 years of middle school, it really caused us to say this isn't a schedule that we were interested in learning more about. That once we sort of saw it, we put this one to the side. So the second idea was to have a longer ELA and math period and a shorter period for science, social studies, and world language. So if you moved world language into the core, it could do a couple things. One, in 5th and 6th grade, you could have a 30-minute period of world language every day. This certainly would increase not only the amount of time for world language, but one of the things that happens now is with world language as part of a rotation, you could go 6 days between having a world language class. And you add in a weekend, and that's really hard for students to retain knowledge over time. So that might allow you to have increase the frequency where the learning's happening. In this model, then, you continue to have the 3 cores. In 7th and 8th grade, you'd have the 2 60 minutes for math and ELA with 3 40-minute classes. So I know some science teachers, and 40 minutes for a science lab doesn't really seem like a terrific idea. And so this wasn't really something that we felt maintained the core instruction time in the way that we would want. And that while it did give us longer amounts of time for science, for ELA and math, it really impacted science and social studies, but also we weren't really meeting what we needed to for world language. So this is a schedule that we said we probably don't want to continue to learn about. Another thought was to combine the first 2 ideas in 7th and 8th grade. If you went with 4 60-minute classes, which is a good longer amount of time, and then rotated science, social studies, and world language. So you'd have 4 days of social studies, 4 days of world language, and 4 days of science over a 6-day period. So there'd be a rotation. So you'd have 4 classes a day, 60 minutes in length. That would be great for science and social studies, and for world language, right, to have that longer amount of time. It's not good for teaming because you have an imbalance. You would have to have basically 1.5 ELA teachers and 1.5 math teachers on each team. You also have some teachers teaching 4 classes and some teachers teaching 6. So it really impacts the ability to plan in a common way. And so while it accomplished some things, this was a schedule that the committee just felt like we didn't want to continue to pursue. So I joked before about I haven't figured out how to add more time. And so what we finally realized is the amount of time in the day is the amount of time in a day. And when you get to the point that you want to divide it by 7 classes and a lunch and a win period, well, you end up with about 45 minutes in a class. And that's just math. You can't really do that differently. So we thought, is there a way to do things a little bit differently? You know, in 5th and 6th grade, we have an idea here where we have longer blocks of time that students would be able to dive more deeply, especially with the smaller teams. There's natural places to have interdisciplinary connections. We were feeling pretty good about that. So what if we thought of a schedule in 7th and 8th grade that was a 6-core day? And basically, you'd have 6 45-minute periods, but 3 of those would be intentionally blocked together. 2 core academic periods and 1 special to create a block. And you would have a humanities block or a STEM block. And this would give the teachers and students ownership of time, about 135 minutes. You could run it as 3 45-minute distinct classes, or you could find times where you're able to do things in a creative way. You could start with a team meeting and go over your plans for the week and then break out. You could have a guest speaker come in. You could have a couple of weeks of running a typical class and then at the end have a project type situation where students are creating an authentic way to demonstrate their learning. Really, the possibilities here are kind of endless. And this is one of those things that when we think about what this might look like in 3 years or 5 years compared to where we are now, we really get excited. Because as the teachers have started to think about some of the possibilities, they've come up with incredible ideas already. A whole simulation about a hurricane and an oil spill and calculating in math class how that would work. Somebody else has already thought about an opportunity to connect with one of the local universities for some research that would really connect actually with family and consumer science and nutrition. So we think that this is the one that we want to learn more about. We think that it hits most of our areas. The only area that it may hit is extended time in math and ELA. And making sure that happen would be based on the teachers and their work. It gives us enough time in world language. It protects time in the core. It allows us to have the different schedule for upper and middle. And again, the future of what this might be is something that's really exciting for us. So what does it actually mean? This is an opportunity here to look at the current time allocations and to see what change would occur. This is an idea of a schedule, right? So do I know that when is going to be at a specific time in the day? I don't know that yet. These are the things that we have to work through and figure out. But you can see that we basically maintain time in ELA. We gain time in math. Science and social studies, it's a little more time in 5th and 6th grade. It's the same amount of time in 7th and 8th grade. But when you combine that together with a block, and you're doing that in a really meaningful way, both in the younger grades and the upper grades, and you're connecting that learning, you're able to do things that are more efficient and certainly more engaging. We really like this schedule because it significantly increases the amount of time available for world language. So not only do we improve on frequency, but we also improve on time for the class. And so we really feel like this is something that we want to explore and learn more about. As we look in the afternoon related to specials, we actually increase time for 5th grade. They would have 2 specials periods a day, which is a significant increase in that area as well. And this idea of blocking, art with English and social studies is really cool. We think that you can come up with some really interesting learning experiences for the students. As you notice here, we are proposing increasing the amount of time for Learn and Win. We are proposing that there would be lunch and recess of 40 minutes in length for 5th and 6th grade. That would actually not include the PA time that is there presently. The trade-off for that is students get a second special every day. So by increasing the amount of time that they're up and moving, that's something that we want to explore. Again, this is an idea. And lunch and recess stays the same in 7th and 8th grade. So
Sarah, sir, 1 second. Can you also, and you're going quick, but for I&E, when we talk about the I&E block being 40 minutes, we're thinking of it as a 6-day rotation, most likely, because we can't get a homeroom in and an advisory in at the same time. So it would be I&E intervention enrichment for probably 4 of the days. One of the days would end up being the advisory session, and then that other day we're thinking of some kind of club activity period, so all students in the whole entire school participate in some kind of club or activity period as well. So that, I just wanted to point, because that was also really a recommendation from all of our groups as well. So it affords us an opportunity for our students in that block.
Thank you. Yes. And so the idea here is that we want to learn more about the possibility of this schedule. We're not saying this is absolutely the schedule, but this is the schedule we're really recommending. Tomorrow we'll go talk with ISC, and then we'll have times over the next 2 weeks to meet with groups of teachers at the middle school level and all 5th grade teachers to have an opportunity to look at this together. And we have a number of things we need to look into. We need to answer some questions. Here's a for example. We need to make sure that this allocation of world language time achieves our aims. We want to really talk about how the UA time would be allocated, right? So we have blocks of time for it, let's say in 5th and 6th grade. But what are students learning in that time? How would we divide up the humanities and the STEM block? Who takes what? Is it a semester of each? Is it divided up differently? What happens with our current interdisciplinary programs? Where does that fit in here, and how does that work? How do we make sure we're meeting the social emotional needs of all of the students? We have to talk about teaming size and structures. We're going to have 3 middle schools that are 3 slightly different times. And then we really want to get teachers in a room to start thinking about what does more interdisciplinary learning look like in 5th and 6th grade? How could these integrated blocks exist and be successfully in 7th and 8th grade? We also have a strong recommendation to think about the idea of student leadership, which includes an opportunity for student voice. This is really critical as we think about the middle school transition, and we would really want to develop that as well. Perhaps even adding a class that would help students develop those leadership skills, which has a lot of tenets and tentacles.
So that's the shell though. So the shell that we're going to use for our schedule is the one that Sarah presented. That's the shell that we'll continue to work through all of those questions by using this shell as we move forward.
And let's see. So to do this, we're going to need to form some new working groups. And we've had a lot of wonderful input from teachers so far. This allows us to expand the number of people. So we'll need to look at things like our report card. We know our 5th grade report card looks very different than our 6th grade report card. We need to look at athletics and activities. And we're really starting to think about transition for staff and students and making sure we have a solid plan there. It's a plan on paper, but now we need to actually start moving in that direction. So we're looking forward to continuing the work here. The timeline of what that's going to look like. Just today, the staff received a survey to both check in and see how they're doing and to start soliciting input on where folks might want to work in the future. We're here tonight doing a community presentation, and we have those continued. So we need to receive lots of input because the final schedule is going to be as good as the input that we receive. And I know there's lots of great ideas out there about how we actually bring it together. Next month, we'll be back, and you'll learn more about what's happening in K4, and we may talk about some of the non-schedule programmatic updates. We are going to continue to work with our teachers in trying to figure out best ideas to implement this. We would like to get student feedback on this schedule as well. In December, we're going to start looking at some student leadership groups to help with the transition, to help plan what those activities look like. In January, we'll be back to give you another update. We'll be doing actual transition activities with the students at their home schools. We'll be forming faculty leadership groups so that we can start developing the culture at the 3 schools and making sure people are feeling really good about that. There's a lot of back-end work that has to happen in Power School. By February, hopefully we'll be working on that updated report card. We'll be doing some curriculum work. And then throughout the spring and summer, this is where we really get into the heart of the faculty and student transition. People will know where they're going, and we're going to start connecting, students and teachers together to work through that transition as we do that. So that's generally the idea of where we think we want to go. If you're interested in learning any more about some of the research that drove these decisions, we have these listed here as well, or feel free to email me or call me. I'm happy to discuss this with you. But that's generally the idea of where we're thinking we're going at this time. So I'm going to stop this, and any questions you may have, just let me know.
Thank you, Ms. Stout, so much, Dr. McLoyne. We'll open up the questions to the board. Ms. Kalish.
Thank you, and thank you, Mrs. Stout. I have one comment and one question. So first, I just wanted to reiterate the part you touched on really briefly about the upper and lower house, because we've had some contact from parents about concerns about 5th and 8th graders going to school together. And so I just want to say that I really appreciate the concern that you and your team have shown in really evaluating 5th and 6th together and 7th and 8th together, and how they would sort of participate on their own, kind of together in the same school, but kind of little houses. I mean, not little houses, but houses. I really appreciate that approach to designing the curriculum. My question was regarding those 2 integrated blocks and the fact that they were 135 minutes. You sort of touched on this today, where you kind of implied that it wouldn't really be like a class for over 2 hours. But my concern was like the ability of a child to sit there and watch. I mean, I'm thinking about graduate school, and if I had a class that long, my mind would start to wander after 135 minutes. And so I was just wondering what the thinking was around avoiding that being an issue.
Sure, absolutely. So the idea is that it's a flexible amount of time. So if I drew this out for you a different way, you could actually put 3 periods of 45 right underneath it, right? So there's going to be times where a group of teachers get together and, I have to teach the student this learning target, and it needs to happen in isolation, and it's not going to naturally fit in an interdisciplinary way, and so that's just going to kind of happen, right? But we want the teachers to be able to move in the direction of doing, projects or experiences where they have that time. So it could look like, hey, today we're just running a normal schedule. We're going to have periods 1, 2, and 3, and you're going to go from block A to block B to block C. It could look like, hey, we're starting with a team meeting in the morning. We're going to do like an extended homeroom. We're going to do a check-in. Because in this situation, you're looking at, half the team in a particular block at a given time. So it's a smaller amount of students with their teachers. It's the other half of the students are in the other block, and then you switch in the afternoon. But, you could do things differently. Maybe you want to run a lab and you want to run a larger amount. So group A is going to have a lab for 60 minutes in a day, and then they're going to have a shorter amount of time, maybe in math and their special, but that way over the course of 3 days, everybody gets that longer amount of time in a lab. Or maybe we're going to build in some goal setting and some check-ins. And so students are working independently, and every student is rotating through having that one-on-one check-in with their teachers. And so the idea is, there's so many different things you can do, but by removing certain constraints of saying, this group of students has to go here at this time, or, oh, well, these students are going somewhere totally else at this time, so we're not able to include them in the next activity. By removing some of those constraints, I think it'll allow the teachers to do the things that they want to do, and they're really excited to do, and sometimes they're not able to do those things because the schedule dictates the instructional activity. So that's kind of where it goes.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And so you could also see doing like, say, the science teacher teaching a larger group, and if the math teacher needs to pull out some kids that need some reinforcement on a certain subject, or some kids that were perhaps needing extra enrichment because they were above what the class was at, is that something, a different way one could also use it?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, or we're going to sort of do like the large group lecture, right? You know, it's 20 minutes of just sort of the basic lecture. We're going to get that out of the way. I know the teacher doesn't have to do that 3 times in a day.
Right.
And now we're able to move in a different way. So
that.
So Sarah began by saying, you know, I can't do anything about the time, but in fact you can if in fact you allow the teachers to work as a team, plan as a team, and make the time work to the activities that they need at the time, rather than say there's a 6-period day or a 7-period day, and that time can't be changed because it would impact a whole bunch of other things. But if the teachers can work as a team, and it's going to require planning on their part, then they can sort of change time within the construct of a day.
And I'd assume you'd gain back some time from passing that you wouldn't need if kids weren't going to that.
Yeah.
This sounds like a really great idea.
And you may also gain back time for certain redundancies, right? So there's, you know, for example, right now, in 6th grade presently, I think there's a short story that the students read that have to do with a natural disaster, and then they're learning about natural disasters in science, right? And so they're not happening at the same time in the year, and there's naturally some repetition that happens there. Well, if we strategically do those things at the same time of the year, you know, we're not going to have to go back and repeat those same things. Students are naturally going to make those connections from content to content because they're happening at a smart time. So it allows us, I think, to become more efficient.
Mr. Mooring?
Yeah, and just going off of something that's maybe relatable and is what's kind of resonating with me is this kind of the team teaching approach and what you're looking at in these blocks look more like kind of what the Evolve program is in the existing middle schools?
It does, and so I mean, that's a really important thing, right? We've seen great success in some of those programs, and we know that not all students have access to that. So, you know, I was actually just over today talking with the Waterbound teachers, and they were like so excited because there's so many cool things that they do, and they're like, we can't wait to share some of this with some of our colleagues. It's not going to look exactly the same. It's not a full day. It's part of the day, right? And we'll evolve and grow into it over time. You know, I was actually talking to the Viewpoints teachers as well today. I think it's their 5th year together, the 2 of them, and they talked about how it really took them 5 years to feel really as great as they do, you know, where they are now. And so, you know, starting now in like year 0, getting an incubator of teachers together to think about some ideas, setting out some benchmarks of like, you know, okay, in the first year, let's try this. In the 2nd year, let's try this. But that is the idea, you know. The research says that that's the right thing to be doing.
Thank you. Ms. Finger?
This is really more of a comment, but as somebody who teaches both at the elementary and middle school level, I really appreciate how this schedule looks with respect to teachers having the time to really be able to be with the students and provide learning experiences, because as we all know, 45 minutes is really not 45 minutes of time. By the time the kids get in and settle, and you've checked in to see how everybody is, and then you're, you know, going through whatever the lesson is going to be, you know, the learning for that time, and then you're wrapping things up and cleaning up and it's time to go. You're lucky if it's maybe 32 minutes, 35 minutes at best. So this really, I think, is going to provide a wonderful experience for the students and the teachers, because especially, you know, a little less transition time and more time to get into flow.
That's right. Yep.
Ms. Robinson?
Thank you for your thoughtful process. And I wanted to just kind of draw out a little bit more the process of considering other schedule options in terms of your background studies and things like that. Could you describe that?
Sure. Let's see, so, I don't know which direction that was here. So, right, so first of all, obviously starting with research, doing an in-depth research review to understand what's recommended, what evidence-based practices show us that there's most growth. And then conducting virtual site visits has been really interesting. So that looks like, finding a school, hey, I want to learn more about this program, tell me how you do this. Zoom was really helpful for that, to be able to connect with different schools in different states, to ask about different specific situations. Before COVID, we were able to visit a variety of local schools. So a number of local school districts have 5-8 programs. So we were able to meet with them and talk about what they were doing. That really helped us to understand situations like, that the developmental needs are different, what they would recommend related to that, certain things with passing time and maybe not having the entire school transition at exactly the same time. So you're limiting who's in the hallway at a given time. So they were really interesting as well. One of my favorite days was when we worked with the fielding architects and we were able to have a panel discussion with some innovative schools. And there was particularly a school in Colorado, and they have, I don't know what this job is, but I think I want it. It's like the innovation director?
Innovation specialist. It's my favorite job in the world.
Yes. So she was really fascinating to talk to, and talking about how they took a space that they had before and they modified the space, like not by building new things, but like we would do at BC or Welsh Valley, how they thought differently about that. They talked about the energy related to the school. We talked to a school in Wisconsin that talked about the different technology that they were able to implement and how that really helped them as well, with some of the pieces that they did. So that was a great day, and that was a large group of people that participated in that. Finding articles, Edutopia is a great website for, hey, here's a teacher, here's a program that's doing this, sort of thing. So really finding as many of those as we can go. With our time with Mike Rettig was really valuable. Not that his particular schedule was exactly the one we came up with, but in inspiring us to think differently about time. That was really helpful as well. Talking to consultants about a leadership curriculum, people who have done innovative programs in different states, about how they've created a school culture that's positive and student voice focused by building the skills students need to actually have meaningful voice within the curriculum. That was an awesome session. And then lots and lots of time with input. I mean, when you calculate it out, I mean, I think we had, well over 40 5-8 committee members that met throughout the pandemic, throughout the summer, then an additional probably 30 people that have met on this scheduling committee, parents, teachers. And then, it's great. Like, I'm so fortunate to be in the role that I'm in today. We had a great meeting on Friday. And I wanted to go talk to a few things, and then a math teacher emailed me from Welsh Valley, and I was able to run over and just go talk to him today, and then came back with like 4 new ideas because he had a really cool idea. So that's been really exciting, and I'm really looking forward to next week being able to sit down. I'm going to go sit down with each grade level at the 2 middle schools and then all of the 5th grades in a small group, so we can really go through this, poke holes in it, everything from, a special at the end of the day, or what do we do to make sure the kids aren't missing a core academic for sports, or where should that I&E period go? So those are, and the more people we talk to about that, the better actual schedule we're going to come up with.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Dr. Gilbert?
Thank you. I just want to thank Dr. McGloin and Mrs. Stout for their work and all the people who have worked with them. To me, this is sort of what the strategic plan was intended to do, was to sort of start rethinking what we do, which, works pretty well. So there's a lot of reasons to maybe not do that as much. And this just sounds really exciting. And I really appreciated the idea of, how is this going to be implemented as well in the other 2 middle schools. So I just wanted to thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think part of the reason, it was a little bit like bold, this idea, right? And I was like, I don't know how this is going to go over, right? And then I was surprised at how quickly people were like, yes, that. you know? And it was like, I think because they believe in the strategic plan, they believe in the idea of doing things, and they could see how the schedule enables that, you know, and it removes some of that. And then I think people like really got excited as they're starting to think about like, okay, this is something we can grow into and expand on over time. So yeah, it was really, really fun. A lot of work to do, but it's fun.
So I'm going to follow up on that, the comment about the scheduling offering a lot of opportunity. 4, 5, I think it was right when you were starting, Mr. Copeland, before I was on the board, I was a parent on a committee that was when we were looking at realigning the 2 middle schools at the time, realigning their 2 schedules. And a consultant came in to talk about how you can use scheduling to really support what your goals are. And I was floored by the fact that that was one of the most interesting school district meetings I've ever been in terms of looking at what a different schedule can do. So I really appreciate sort of the thought and the sort of the excitement and what you can do just by changing a schedule around. One of the things that Dr. McGloin quickly commented on that I wanted to point out or ask more about was the idea of having clubs during the school day. I know that you know, the research shows, or we know that kids that are connected to a school and connected to either, you know, other students and to adults within the school have better outcomes. They do better as students. And so I really like that that's something that's built in, that there's that opportunity and encouragement to get involved, because I also think that as kids are encouraged in middle school to be more involved, that when they get to the high school and it's more, there are more options, but it can also be a little bit overwhelming. They sort of are used to that idea of having that connection within a school and hopefully seek out more opportunities for that.
Yes, thank you. I think the schedule does a couple of different things. One, by having longer blocks of time with your teachers, and especially in 5th and 6th grade, having that smaller team, I think you're naturally going to build more connections. So, you know, you're starting the day with that longer block of time, starting with a morning meeting. It's not going to feel as rushed. You're going to really be able to develop that in an ongoing and very regular basis. And then I think thinking about what needs to happen during that intervention and enrichment period that are certainly academic interventions and enriching things that need to happen. But again, how do we, you know, do team-based activities? How do we have those clubs and activities? How do we have kids feel better about what's happening in the building? And then there's like a 2-side to that, right? When kids feel better about being, you know, about maybe having a club and activity, and then their peers are able to see a unique talent or a gift that they have or a real passion that they have, you know, that's going to go back into the classroom, and kids are going to like look at one another, you know, in a different way. Like, hey, I didn't know that about you. So I think building in that sort of social emotional is so important. The research really is clear on that, and that you have to really build that strong foundation.
We're actually piloting software at Welsh Valley this year that allows students to choose I&E time or teachers to assign students to I&E time. And within the first week, we had 50% of our students either assigned or choosing a block of time, which is a really high number in the beginning of it. So Mr. Hall is going to work towards, in the next couple, hopefully within the next few months, that idea that all students are going to be involved in clubs or some kind of activity at his building. So we're trying it out as a pilot, even with the clubs and activities at Welsh Valley this school year. And so, you know, it's been short but successful so far.
Great, that's really terrific. Sort of, and a follow-up question around sort of the engagement. Can you speak a little bit to how really the tie-in with the diversity, equity, and inclusion piece of it, and even tying in with the restorative practices that we've implemented throughout the district?
Sure, absolutely. So again, you know, when students are seen for who they are, it helps them to feel like they belong more in an environment. And so when you are able to create projects and opportunities to show what they know and what they can do in creative and innovative ways, they're going to feel better about that, right? So, you know, for example, in 6th grade, a lot of students really enjoy, you know, doing a unit on Operation Montserrat, right? Where they, you know, there's a volcano on an island and they have to go, right? And so, you know, you tie that, which is so engaging and so fun, you know, and you have students show a math concept, right? Because there's a lot of like graphs in that and change over time, which is like a very like math 6, math 7, 8 concept. maybe you have a student who might not feel as strong in that math area, but now when it's connected to something that's real world, it makes sense, right? And then they're able to show hey, I do know how to do this because I'm able to apply it to this other thing. That's really powerful and exciting. And if we can create more opportunities like that, that's really important. When students are working in projects or in small groups, right, you get to know students better on a personal level. And so, we see friendships formed in that way, right? And that's, the research says that's really true as well. Simply just like slowing it down a little bit, right? Like less transitions, less, bell go, bell go, bell go, like lower the anxiety, be yourself, right? Like feel good about being here, I think that's like a way we want to move here as well. When we talk about restorative practices, so much of that is having conversations, facilitating conversations, teaching children how to have, conversation, using circles, right? That goes back to that morning meeting, how we start the day. And then if there's a problem that arises, whether it be, hey, we're having a conflict in a group and, we're supposed to be rescuing Montserrat and we can't agree on how to do that, taking the time to help kids work through conflict in that way, that's really the nature of what we want to do with restorative practices, because it's, it's restoring a relationship and continuing to grow. And that model says we want to do things with students, not to them or for them, but we want to facilitate their learning, facilitating their growth and empowering them.
Go ahead. Thank you.
You mentioned, you mentioned how, in 5th and 6th grade, they'd maybe start the day with the morning meeting. How do you see starting the day in 7th and 8th grade? Well, that's where I'll end it.
So I could see, all right, hey, the teachers are doing a great job of using those weekly plans I think that was one of those COVID keepers that are a good one, right? And so rather than, we're going to do this isolated, weekly plan and this isolated weekly plan, let's do that together. Let's sit together as a team. Let's go through. I can tell you right now how that's connected. Maybe we're going to have a question or a thought of a day, and then we can break out into small groups, or we could have some speakers come in. Maybe once every 2 weeks we have like a career speaker come in, and then we talk about it, or we show a video. We do if you connect it and you have your rally lesson occur at that time, or you make sure the rally lesson's happening with the group of students that know each other so well in that block. So different thoughts there.
A lot of this is still a work in progress, though, so that's why you see this shell that's up here, but, we're going to now start working through how all of that will function moving into the year. So I would say, she shared some wonderful ideas, but it is a work in progress at this point.
Any other thoughts, comments, questions from the board? Great. So I think we're going to thank you very much, Ms. Stout and Dr. McGloin. We're going to move on to audience recognition. So if you are at home on Zoom at this time, you'll see a 10-minute timer appear on your screen, and the chat feature will be open. You can submit your comments and or questions via the chat. And please begin with your full name and where you reside within the district. That's important information for the comment to be shared. And again, just your name and where. It doesn't need to be a specific street, but a neighborhood is fine. And Ms. LaPera, do we have any in-person comments for tonight's meeting?
Good evening. My name is Ruth Jenkin. Spent many years as a middle school teacher. It was a humanities program, so we did both history and English together, and it worked out. It was a beautiful combination. But the feeling often was that middle schools were created because they didn't belong in the elementary school and they weren't ready for high school, so let's put them in this building for 3 years and then they'll be ready to go to high school. But that's not what I came to talk about tonight. I came to talk about the challenge that the board is attempting to make the decision by the zoning board to not allow lights on Arnold Field. It really goes against the zoning laws that were put in place to protect the entire community. The zoning board heard from a cross-section of the community who expressed residential and environmental impacts of the lights on Arnold Field, as well as parents, school officials, and students who were in favor. The zoning board made a fair and equitable decision. My second point refers to the sleep study, which was done to advance the construction of the 80-foot light poles. Any of you who are or were or will be parents of teens know that sleep is up to them. 1/2 hour later will make no difference in their lack of sleep. Too much homework could be the real cause, as well as the computer and the phone and everything else. Some students also work after school and care for younger siblings, and this would impact them and be a hardship on them. I also would like to reference the sunshine laws, which I have a hard time finding for some of the meetings that are going on not being posted. I also noticed that there were no banisters on the bleachers near the field house. I think this is not in compliance. I also want to refer to the possible tearing down of the newly renovated field house so that you could then put lights on Arnold Field. We live in a beautiful community with many parks, shopping, transportation, and outstanding schools. Let not an air of entitlement mar the township because of a lack of regard for those who are thought to be less entitled. Abuse of power and unrestricted funds is not a fair playing field. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson?
Good evening. My name is Joel Johnson. I live in Ardmore. I have 2 sons, both at Harriton now. I came this evening to say thank you to Superintendent Copeland. I've had the pleasure and honor of working with the superintendent on a number of committees, Care Committee, Achievement Imperative, and some others. And I think we have been, as a district, we're always very fortunate with our resources and our tremendous board leadership and board and administrators and teachers and support staff. And we've been very, very fortunate to have the dedication of Bob Copeland for the last 6 years. It's really remarkable. I've had the opportunity to have an exposure to a number of public sector chief executives, and without exception, I think Bob Copeland's actually absolutely at the top of the list. He's done a phenomenal job at the macro level, implementing strategic plan, managing during the pandemic, but also at the granular level, the micro level. We heard how involved he was with the planning for the new middle school, which sounds, phenomenal. As you may know, the superintendent took a trip to a number of public and private schools to test out the seating in the auditorium. So it's that kind of granularity that's really speaks to his character, his dedication to doing to getting the details right, which really matters in an executive position, in a leadership position. Additionally, a number of years ago, he contacted the English department chair at Harriton High School and said that the school should have an African American literature class. And that was implemented a couple of years ago, I believe. My son is now a student in that class. And it's been a remarkable course, a couple of months in now. And frankly, one of the only times that a classroom, and he's been in this district since kindergarten, he's a senior, it's majority African American. And an honors level course, it's a very challenging course, but that type of vision and strategic thinking and concern for the student is very critical, and I think Superintendent Copeland's done a phenomenal job at that. And we're so fortunate that we've had your leadership for the last 6 years. So, sir, thank you so much, and I wish you nothing but the best in retirement.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let me just respond to something that Ms. Jenkins said. I respectfully disagree in terms of the final decision of the zoning hearing board, but I think I do want to correct the issue that the tearing down of the field house is not the same. That has not been newly renovated. It was the bleachers that were newly renovated, and nothing would happen to those newly renovated bleachers if that second plan went through.
If we have no other in-person public comment, Ms. Buckman, if you can start reading the ones that have come in while we finish out the time. I think it's just a few more minutes.
Sure. The first comment we have is from Mark Fasano of Wynwood. He says, thanks for your presentation on the 5 to 8 middle school scheduling. It looks innovative and exciting. I want to ask about kindergarten. Is the district committed to offering universal full-day kindergarten? If so, what specific metrics would you all need to see in order to announce that Lmsd will offer full-day kindergarten? As you know, Radnor has offered full-day kindergarten for 7 years. They are preparing to pilot targeted pre-K. Full-day kindergarten has been in many ways a transformational success in Radnor. Among other measures, the district found that reading assessments showed 80.3% of kindergarten students were reading at or above grade level at the end of the 2014-15 school year, the first year of full-day K implementation, up from 72.7% the year before. Especially after the disruption kids in our district have recently experienced, an integrated and inclusive full-day kindergarten experience is more important than ever. Thank you for your time. I don't know if you want to, okay, I'll keep going. The next one is from Jennifer Hoffman of Marion Station. How will the district make this transition developmentally appropriate for 5th graders, i.e. schedule, bus, after-school clubs and activities, teaming, morning meetings, social emotional learning time, social events, being physically separated from 7th and 8th graders? The next comment is from Sabrina Relaford of Ballackinwood. I am a bit confused by the blocks for 5-6. Is it correct that it is 80 minutes for ELA, 70 minutes for social studies, science, and 60 minutes for math, not the 3 80-minute blocks mentioned on the slide? Doesn't that mean 10 minutes less for ELA? And didn't you also mention doing morning meeting during the ELA block? This seems like a significant decrease in time for ELA. Is that a good idea? And if so, why do we think so?
I'll ask if you can give a brief response to that.
So the times that were mentioned are correct. There was multiple schedules presented. I think in one of the schedules that we looked at, we did have 3 80-minute blocks, but we moved towards the different times that were put forward. Part of that had to do with speaking with 5th grade teachers about the amount of time presently allocated for math, as well as thinking about what's presently happening at the elementary and in 6th grade with the ELA blocks. Morning meeting is something that occurs now in the elementary schools. It doesn't have to be a long and involved thing. It can be short at the beginning of the day. It actually could occur later in the day, so there's a number of places where we could put it. To Dr. McGloin's point earlier, these are different ideas that we're looking into, so we're not prepared to show you, exactly what that would look like. We did share a slide, and it's posted on the board docs if you want to look at, that breaks down the exact difference between the time that's available now and the proposed time. So you can see not only in one given year the amount of time that's changed, but also what happens over the course of 4 years. And that's exactly the kind of questions that we want to keep having. So I hope that maybe we could have a longer discussion about that, either at the ISC meeting that's coming up, or different community meetings. But that's exactly the really important kind of questions. Is that enough time? What do the teachers say? When we look at the curriculum, is that enough time? So that's I really appreciate that comment, because that's exactly what we need to now vet.
Thank you, sir.
The next comment is from Christina Chang of Penn Valley. Thank you, Dr. McGloin and Ms. Stout, for the thoughtful presentation and ongoing dialogue to reimagine grades 5 through 8. I'd like to shift to the transportation issue, which is nationwide, which likely won't resolve itself. Would LMSD consider working with the Lower Merion Commissioners to re-perform a transportation study? Can we expand the walk zones? Some key roadways to schools, such as Old Gulf Road and Haggiesford Road, are not safe for walkers and bicyclists. This is not an easy fix, but what can be possible if we place more focus on safe passageways for students? There isn't even a crossing guard at the intersection of Haggiesford and Conshohocken State Road. There are many important initiatives that the school district is working on, but transportation and safe roads should also be a priority. Thank you. The next comment is from Catherine Jordan of Narberth. In the new middle school schedule, will students have a chance to switch to the world language of their choice in 5th grade rather than being tied to the language of their neighborhood elementary school?
I think that one of the things we talked about is world language is still in development, so they're looking at different options for that, correct?
The next comment is from Jamie Bassman of Ardmore. She's the president of the Committee for Special Education. Thank you so much, Dr. McGloin and Ms. Stout, for this creative and thoughtful approach to scheduling, which will also lend itself to more differentiated instruction and inclusion. This is a great time to consider a more proactive and expansive role for our special educators so that more students are being reached in the general education classroom through co-teaching. Please also consider how to integrate more classroom-wide executive functioning interventions in coordination with the MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support, particularly for 5th and 6th graders. We at CSE look forward to discussing and collaborating. Thank you. The next comment is from Virginia Davis of Wynwood. I joined the meeting a little late, so forgive me if this already came up in tonight's meeting. I am writing today to ask for an update on the prospect of full-day kindergarten in the elementary schools now that 5th grade will be moving to the middle schools.
Let me answer. So the last, there were two folks talked about full-day kindergarten. The largest barrier to full-day kindergarten has been space. The space will be resolved, and it will be the decision of the new board and administration going forward with this situation with kindergarten. I don't think it's been a discussion at this point.
Not yet. I just wanted to point out the need for the new middle school, for adding the new school, was because our current elementary schools are overcrowded, right? So the lunchrooms are really crowded. In some schools there's art on a cart. There's specials that are in the classrooms instead of having their own specials rooms. So the new middle school and moving the 5th grade out will definitely help alleviate. I mean, that's the purpose of the new school, is to help alleviate that overcrowding. And in an ideal world, that alleviating the overcrowding will also open up enough space for the opportunity for full-day kindergarten. But we need to open the new middle school and see what that means for our elementary schools to know if that is an opportunity that that we haven't discussed as a board. I think that there's, I can't speak on behalf of the board, right? But there is general support for for universal full-day kindergarten. But we do need to remember that moving the 5th grade out of the elementary schools is meant to alleviate the overcrowding, and it's not, unfortunately, it's not a guarantee that there will be enough space in each of the elementary schools for universal full-day kindergarten. We've had changes in enrollment over the last year. That may be the opportunity that we need to be able to do this. But I do think that we need to be cognizant of the fact that the new middle school and moving the 5th grade does not necessarily mean that there's going to be tons of room at each of the elementary schools.
We have one more comment from Janice Lipsitz of Marion Station. First, what an incredible breath of fresh air on this innovative vision. Sarah Stout and Dr. McGloin are strong, innovative leaders, and I am personally a beneficiary of Ms. Stout's authentic connection and guidance of students with learning differences. Grateful for their leadership. As one of the co-founders of LMHS Hughes Unity and Equity Subcommittee, I will be eager to see how some of these strategies, and in particular the DEI strategies, can be translated to our existing school cultures. Are there plans to quickly apply some of these concepts?
That's it. Let me go back and just address the transportation. During the pandemic, one of the things that we wanted to do to de-densify the buses was to expand the walk zone, and we did that in various places. Unfortunately, people didn't really take advantage of that. If there were to be the opportunity to expand the walk zones, to take a look at transportation, I think that that's a worthy challenge. If the board and the Board of Commissioners wanted to re-up their working group, maybe that's a place to start. Our immediate issue for transportation, however, is not that. Our immediate issue for transportation are the number of bus drivers, particularly as we look to the new middle school, which is going to, because of where it is and because of our needs, we're going to need new drivers for that. That's the number one thing that we have to deal with right now.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question to that around the transportation? A few years ago, the Transportation Department did a terrific presentation for the Interschool Council during one of the hot topics. And one of the things they talked about that I hadn't realized is that a lot of routes, whether they're deemed dangerous or walkable, is actually determined by PennDOT and not necessarily determined by the district.
Correct.
Right, so I think that that's another piece of it as well, is that there are some constraints on what's considered walkable and what's considered dangerous road. For example, Ithan Avenue, right, parts of Ithan Avenue, PennDOT has deemed as dangerous roads so that the district provides busing there, and that it's not, not a walk zone.
Yeah.
So I just think that it's an important piece to the puzzle that people should be aware of.
But in addition, you're correct, and that PennDOT does make that determination. However, the district on occasion has said, you know what, even though this doesn't qualify, we're prepared to provide transportation. I can think of some areas on Montgomery Avenue and so forth where I've actually personally gone out and said, okay, that's, and I've talked with the folks and they said, I'd be uncomfortable with my kids, so we've made the change even though PennDOT hasn't done it.
Right, so that's sort of the flip, right? So we can,
but
if PennDOT says it's dangerous, we can't then go and say it's not. But we can say, if they haven't designated it as dangerous, we can say, we're not comfortable having our students walk that. Okay, thank you.
If you know somebody that has a CDL, please tell them to look at our website. We are hiring bus drivers.
Thank you, Ms. Buckman, for reading those public comments. So tonight being an education committee meeting, there are no action items on the agenda. Upcoming meetings include on Thursday, October 14th, Facilities and Purchasing Committee meeting is here in the boardroom at 8:30 a.m. and it will be live streamed. Next Monday, October 18th, is the regular business board meeting at 8 p.m. That meeting will be in the LMHS in the Lower Merion High School auditorium. And October 20th is our next ad hoc committee for equity and anti-racism here at 7 p.m. Before we end tonight, I wanted to remind everyone of some upcoming district-wide events. Tomorrow morning at 9:30 is the monthly ISC Hot Topic meeting, focusing again on this middle school schedule topic. So if you were listening tonight and overnight and you can't sleep and you had some thoughts or ideas that you wanted to share, please come to the ISC meeting tomorrow morning and share those and learn more about what's going on. Next Tuesday, October 19th, is the first part of a two-part series sponsored by both the Committee for Special Education and the Interschool Council on executive functioning skills. The first part is geared more towards elementary students, and there will be a second one about a month later. And finally, please join us next Monday night for a regular business board meeting to not only celebrate and honor our National Merit semifinalists and commended students, which is why the meeting's in the Lower Merion High School auditorium, but also to welcome our new superintendent, Dr. Mameen, on his first official day at the district. I hope you all have a good evening. This meeting is now adjourned.